Welcome to our second episode of the Virtual Psychiatrist. My name is Norm Clement, and I am a dentist and a pharmacist, and I publish a daily blog titled You Are Within the Norms. You know, when we look at medicine, especially psychiatry, it's remarkable how we find individuals who refuse to abide by the norms. Dr. Muhamad Aly Rifai isn't just a physician. He's, in my view, a man who dares to disrupt the very fabric of mental health care. I mean, redefines it entirely. Take his leadership at Blue Mountain Psychiatry, for instance, where he's initiated groundbreaking interventions like treatment with ketamine and transcranial magnetic stimulation. He is an outstanding human, and it is my pleasure to talk about him today, co-hosting this podcast to talk about this noble man.
Right. And those are therapies that might have seemed, experimental? Even fringe to some less than a decade ago. But what sets him apart is how he's making these advancements accessible to, the people who need them the most, especially in underserved or rural communities where specialists and traditional care often don't reach. Hello, I am your co-host Susie Reynolds, and I have known Dr. Rifai for a while, and boy was he always a special individual and grew up to be a great doctor with an international reputation.
Exactly, Susie. And it's that vision of care without boundaries, that stands out. But it's more than just technology for Dr. Rifai. Here's a story. Imagine a community tucked away in Pennsylvania's countryside, places where the idea of mental health services might only mean a phone number to some shadowy helpline and nothing more tangible. Through telepsychiatry, he bridged that gap. He reached out, virtually stepping into living rooms, schools, shelters.
And in doing so, you've got individuals who never thought they'd have access to specialized care suddenly able to talk with someone who understands conditions like anxiety, depression, addiction, things they've been coping with silently for years. That's transformative.
It's revolutionary, period. But here's the twist. He doesn't just rely on virtual methods. On top of that, there's this tangible aspect. He listens to the pulse of these communities. By doing so, he doesn't just implement technologies for the sake of it. Instead, it's layered with understanding, with outreach tailored to specific needs.
And that's the core of innovation here, right? It's not innovation for innovation's sake. It's innovation with impact. That moral responsibility to ensure care isn't a privilege for only a few. What I find fascinating is how he also incorporates advanced therapies like ketamine infusions for treatment-resistant cases. It's all part of this broader mission.
Yeah, and it raises the question, the responsibility professionals like him uphold, because Dr. Rifai's work challenges preconceived notions about what's possible in psychiatry. And in my view, it resets the standard altogether.
And speaking of that standard, Norman, what really stands out about Dr. Rifai is how he brings that same innovative spirit to his leadership roles. His presidency at the Lehigh Valley Psychiatric Society wasn't just a title. Under his leadership, there was this push, almost a reawakening, to prioritize equity in patient care. He galvanized the community during the times of the COVID-19 pandemic and led the efforts on telehealth and telepsychiatry.
Oh, absolutely, Susie. And it's bigger than that. It's philosophical, almost. His leadership award from the Pennsylvania Psychiatric Society wasn't handed out because he attended meetings and shook hands. It reflects a greater accountability, a commitment to those often left behind, forgotten in these systems that weren't built to serve everyone equally.
Exactly. He didn't just sit in an office and, bark orders. This was someone who actively mentored others, building talent pipelines, strengthening the field for the future. And we see that, don't we? In how many of his colleagues and students go on to lead with that same sense of purpose.
Purpose, yes, but also it's his insistence on systemic improvement, Look, the man isn't afraid to say some systems are broken, to challenge traditions where necessary. At Blue Mountain Psychiatry, he didn't just extend services, he elevated standards of care outright. His work with the Lehigh Valley Endowed Chair of Addiction Medicine exemplifies this. It's the merging of science, compassion, and localized care that makes it effective.
And not just effective, inspirational. He shows what's possible when leadership isn't constrained to policies and bureaucracies, but is driven by moral clarity. That's rare, Norman, and it's why his work in mentorship resonates. People see what he's done, how he consistently prioritizes patients, and it influences how they lead in turn.
It does. And the real power in his advocacy, it's rooted in listening. He gives people a voice, especially those long excluded. If anything, it's this quiet but powerful defiance against the status quo that underpins everything he's achieved. Transforming systems isn't easy, but he's proven it's. And yet, Susie, there's an irony here. A doctor who's dedicated his life to uplifting underserved communities and transforming psychiatry, facing allegations of fraud from the very system he's worked tirelessly to improve. This was the stark reality for Dr. Muhamad Aly Rifai. But the government was in for a surprise. They have messed with the wrong Muhammad Ali.
It's a scenario that feels not just unfair, but almost, I'd say, absurd. The government alleged he billed for services at 2 hospitals simultaneously, and even for patients who had passed away. But there was no evidence of intentional fraud, no attempt to deceive the system.
Absurd is right. And think about it, the weight of those accusations. His name, reputation, career, all thrust into jeopardy overnight. Yet he didn't crumble. Instead, he stood his ground. He knew his innocence and he fought for it. They messed with the wrong Muhammad Ali, I say.
With a legal team he carefully assembled, right? Dr. Rifai wasn't passive in this. He was strategic. He worked with experts to comb through the evidence and clarify his clinical practices, and the jury found him not guilty, entirely exonerating him.
It's the kind of resilience, Susie, that we don't see often enough. Here's a professional who could have had his entire career reduced to a footnote. Instead, this trial became a testament to his character, to his relentless commitment to justice and transparency.
And it's not just about him, Norman. The message his story sends to professionals everywhere is profound. It says, you don't have to bow to false accusations or systemic pressure. You can fight back and you can prevail.
Even more than that, Susie, it's a call to reform. Situations like this expose cracks in the system, how well-meaning professionals can be targeted unfairly. It's a reminder that we need safeguards against unjust prosecution. But Dr. Rifai, he took this ordeal and turned it into a platform to inspire others. They messed with the wrong Muhammad Ali, I say again.
Exactly. He's been vocal about his experience, not just to clear his name, but to ensure others learn from it. Whether it's speaking to emerging professionals or advocating for policy changes, he's channeling this part of his life into something transformative.
And that transformation, it serves as a beacon. Dr. Rifai reminds every professional facing undue adversity that integrity, when backed by courage, has the power to transcend even the harshest trials. It's a story about resilience, yes, but also about moral strength in the face of systemic challenges. Susie, stories like Dr. Muhammad Aly Rifai's don't just end with vindication, they lead to evolution. His journey didn't stop at clearing his name, it propelled his mission further. And when we think about his work at the National Institute of Mental Health, it's clear his breakthroughs weren't just scientific, they redefined care itself.
Absolutely, Norman. He's not just an educator or a clinician. He's someone who's consistently bridged the gap between psychiatry and cutting-edge research. His studies on hepatitis C and its connection to psychiatric disorders. It's the kind of work that creates ripples across the field globally, you know?
And those ripples, Susie, they travel vast distances. You see it in how he collaborates internationally, whether consulting with the American Psychiatric Association or addressing issues of cross-cultural psychiatry. It's as if his career embodies a kind of global psychiatry, a model that acknowledges the nuances of culture, language, and even geography in mental health care.
Right, and his multilingual skills, Arabic, French, Turkish, Spanish, those aren't just tools for communication. They're gateways to understanding the lived experiences of patients who might otherwise feel alienated. That's what cross-cultural psychiatry is about, meeting patients where they are, in every sense.
Exactly. And if you think about his academic roles, his responsibility doesn't end in the classroom or the lab. Dr. Rifai embodies mentorship, fostering the kind of environment where students and young professionals are encouraged to question, to innovate, to break the mold.
It's that forward-thinking approach that sets him apart. He's not just teaching future clinicians how to practice psychiatry, he's inspiring them to redefine it, to say, how can I improve the system for my patients? That's a mindset that ripples across generations of care providers.
And isn't that the mark of true impact? Susie, I think of Dr. Rifai not just as an individual, but as a beacon, guiding both his colleagues today and the next wave of professionals tomorrow. His legacy feels almost inseparable from the progress psychiatry continues to make on a global scale.
It does. And for those listening, you may not be clinicians, but his story is a call to action for all of us. It's about remembering the power of one person's dedication to better the lives of many, whether it's in our communities, our workplaces, or even just in how we show empathy. Dr. Rifai reminds us what's possible.
And to that point, Susie, if there's one thing we can all take away from his journey, it's this. Innovation and compassion aren't exclusive traits, but together they create a force capable of shaping industries and lives. Well, that's all for today, folks. Until next time, stay inspired and make a difference. And you're within the norms.